How are you? So welcome to this week's Insta Live. It's quite an interesting one because there's been a shitload of stuff happening in India with the pandemic. So we've decided to make this week's Insta Live a fundraiser for the British Red Cross. They're doing a bunch of COVID relief stuff. If you feel like it, just hit the donate button. So this week's chat is with one of my favourite bands, or the leader of one of my favourite bands, Penguin Cafe. He and I met through non-musical means, actually. We crossed paths in various different ways. But there he is. I'm just going to request him to join me. Hi, Amaya. How are you? Hey, big up Chris. Tofu in the house. Nice to see you, bruv. Bodhi, how are you? Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, good. How's it going?
Not bad. These cocktails are awesome, by the way. So thanks for hooking up. First of all, thanks for doing this with me. Really appreciate it.
Of course.
And
of course.
secondly, thanks for hooking up cocktails with your mate. Disco Cocktails from, what's the bar called? Ladies and Gentlemen Bar in London.
Ladies and gents in Kentish Town. I've got to admit, they haven't arrived here in Italy yet. I believe yours arrived today. So
They did.
They're efficient, but mostly in the UK. I think that's probably fair to say.
Well, also, this is the first one of these that I'm doing with something other than bourbon and Coke. So I'm going to be completely shit-faced after this, by the way, because I've got like 3 different cocktails to try.
Well, I've tried to do my best. I've got some bourbon.
Nice.
But it's not quite an old-fashioned.
No. We'll get there. But look, thanks for joining me, Arthur. I mean, everyone, this is Arthur Jeffeys from the Penguin Cafe. And I was just thinking, like, when we first met was actually Bestival, was when I first met you properly.
Yeah, that would have been. It was the year when they had the stage at the top of the field.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was good because I guess we didn't get like covered in mud, but it did rain a bit, and there was a bit of slipping away from the stage. Well, that's how I've described their behaviour in my head.
Yeah, totally. But it's mad because I know your stepbrother really well. Big up Joe. And that's how we know each other, and not through our many musical connections that we've subsequently discovered over the years.
Well, exactly. It's I think as we've said before, it's a small world, but often connected not necessarily just through people that work in music. It's it's bizarre how many people we know in common.
Yeah, it multiplies every year. So I was going to say, like, so you are known as Penguin Cafe, but the origin story, the true origin story, going back to the golden age, as it were.
Yeah.
It was Penguin Cafe Orchestra, which I'm sure if you're watching and you don't know who Penguin Cafe Orchestra are, watch any film and you'll hear their music in any film, pretty much. They've just been a mainstay in Hollywood for, at the end of every uplifting part of a film, you'll hear Penguin Cafe Orchestra.
It's true. I mean, there are a couple of pieces that were particularly popular. There's one called Music for a Found Harmonium, which my dad wrote in the early 80s. And that kind of, it was so popular in so many different forums, I think, that and used for a lot of things where people kind of forgot that it had been written by someone who was still alive. So it often gets credited as being a trad anon piece because it's kind of got that Celtic, faintly Irish vibe.
It's got that timeless feel for sure. I'm just trying to pull it up on my computer. I'm not getting distracted. I'm listening to you. I was trying to pull it up.
But yeah, my dad always found that quite funny, and I think very. He was really happy about it. The idea that a tune could so quickly kind of soak into the firmament that people assumed it must have been written, centuries ago rather than, years ago.
That is quite interesting because I think that's it. It's got this timeless feel to it for sure, and it does sound like it's been around forever.
Exactly, it gets included in lots of reels with, that kind of that Scottish Northumbrian vibe where you'll get a tune which has 3 or 4 different ideas in it.
Yeah,
and they've all got their own names, and then it's.
So just rewinding even further, your dad formed Penguin Cafe Orchestra, right? And how did that come about? Because it's still quite recent. It's like I always thought it was a 70s thing, but it was an 80s thing.
Well, no, it was a 70s thing.
Okay.
Their first, well, I mean, the the cool fact is their first gig they ever did, they supported what are called the amazing. They supported Kraftwerk at the Roundhouse.
What?
And this is like early Kraftwerk. It's like, and I think at that point my dad's stuff was pretty, it was early days, quite experimental. And so I think that gig, given that Kraftwerk also were super esoteric, like it was before their massively accessible later stuff. But yes, I mean, we've got somewhere a copy of, I think it's a Time Out review, but it's just literally the guy, he wasn't like, angry, but he was definitely discombobulated.
Just like what is, but that's the thing. The band. Okay, so the band, your dad's band, was composed of essentially. It was an orchestra. It was like a chamber orchestra with addendums and additional sort of found instruments and old instruments and things, right?
Yeah.
And
well,
percussion.
I think the first instance of it, like they'd been playing together for a few years before, and so it was my dad, Helen Liebman, whose mum is Joe Wright, our kind of.
Who is Joe's mum? Because it's not Helen's mum that you just said. It's
Helen's his mum. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's Simon, my dad, Simon Jeffs, Helen Liebman, Gavin Wright, Jeffrey Richardson. So Gavin was on violin, Jeffrey was on viola, and then Steve Nye, who went on to great things. He's another keyboard player and multi-instrumentalist, a bit like my dad. So he co-produced some of the early stuff as well. And those five were the original core. And then it kind of, I think quite quickly. So by the time they did their first album in '76, there were more people on board.
And touring it must have been a fucking nightmare, considering just how sprawling the band was. It just seemed to expand. It's like looking at, I don't know, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's just a load of superheroes that's ever growing and ever spiraling out of control.
That's a good way of thinking about it. I mean, there were like various iterations of the lineup over their sort of 25 year period, like ranging from 7, 9, I think they pushed 10 once or twice. And then by the 90s, like mid 90s, because my dad got ill and he died in '97, and but that period just before that, they were doing a quintet, so they were back down to this like
literally a chamber orchestra.
Yeah, it's like a chamber group. Because it had Annie Whitehead on trombone, which I don't know if that quite counts as chamber. It's like,
okay, fair enough. Yeah.
It was this kind of, it was a very mutable lineup to get, to express the sound my dad was looking for. And then when we started it up, sort of 11 years after he died, I obviously wasn't as good as my dad at keeping things tight and trimmed. So we quite quickly got up to 12 on stage, I think.
I thought you meant in terms of timing. I was like, bruv, I've seen your timing. You're like a fucking metronome. So, I mean...
That's very sweet of you to say. I'm not sure the always agree. But I mean, just keeping things... I mean, I really enjoyed that kind of slightly chaotic like vibe where it looks quite like chaotic on stage, but the sound is all... so there is a chord that you can really hear, you know where the pulse is, and everyone's sufficiently in the pocket that a little bit of visual and occasional sonic chaos you don't lose the thread. Yeah.
It's cohesive, but there's little tendrils that will come off and then they get reeled back in, and
I mean, and especially with us being a instrumental band, I think it's possible. As there was one time when I got to see us play without being in the band, because we played a whole album a few years ago. We did one of my dad's albums, and there's one track that I didn't need to play on, so I got an opportunity at Union Chapel to go and stand out in the audience and watch the band play. And it was kind of like I expected. You can really just get lost in individual like stories on the stage. because you're like, because there's no like singer to focus the attention, no soloist. And obviously some people are having a great time and other people are, you know, like they're either struggling with their attention or, you know, one of the drums has rolled away or, you know.
Do you obviously like other bands? You just like there must be internal band dynamics that play themselves out on stage. So someone's pissed off with someone else, and they're just like, "For fuck's sake, you were meant to have done this," but and you can see all of that going on.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely true. But I think there was, I mean, because I was coming to the whole, you know, being in a band, doing a band thing, like I think universally a lot later than everyone else that that came and joined.
So let me just get this timeline right. So it's Penguin Cafe Orchestra. Your dad
Yeah.
passed away in the mid-90s or so.
Well, my dad died in December '97.
Okay. And then was it sort of, I mean, it's got to be quite difficult because obviously you're going through trauma and loss and there's all this other, I imagine it must have been really difficult. And then sort of growing Penguin Cafe out of the Penguin Cafe Orchestra must have been another, well, I mean, was it difficult or was it a fairly natural flow?
Well, it took, when there was 10 years between when my dad died and everything stopped. And then
Right.
there was actually a gig. So I got together with the members of my dad's band, you know, like in the late '90s, and we did a series of 3 shows to mark 10 years since he'd died. And this was the first time I'd ever been on stage, and it was
Whatever.
yeah, literally, yeah, it was nuts. And so that was in 2000. It must have been at the end of 2007. It was that Christmas, you know, 2007, 2008.
That recent. I'm shocked. I thought I'd imagine being like a music brat. You'd have been in fucking loads of bands your entire life and been dragged on stage by your dad and all sorts of stuff.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was 18, I think, when he died. And I think that my dad, I mean, I have this kind of thing where I would have been uncomfortable. And I think my dad also would have been uncomfortable pulling an 18-year-old on stage when, you know, I wasn't good enough to do that at that point. And so like that level of nepotism would have been a little bit of a kind of, it would have, not an insult, but it would have been faintly disrespectful to the audience. And
or to the band members that would have been like, what the fuck is this kid on stage who can't play?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I totally understand why I didn't, that never happened before my dad died. And then, I mean, I've been working in music like since university, but I was doing like composing and producing. There was never kind of front of house stuff. But it was a real, it was just an amazing experience. And I mean, it was really lovely for me because I think, you know, 10 years after my dad died, it was still fresh enough that it was kind of, it was like probing us, you know, a toothache or something. It was like better to go into it than shy away from it.
Yeah.
And yeah, and it was just amazing to kind of see this side of music where it's all kind of, you know, really worried before you're on stage and like loads of prep, but you're pretty sure it's the wrong prep. And like, and then you realize something someone said in the past, you're like, oh, I see what you mean.
It was like lots of pennies dropping at the same time.
All over the place, and understanding like that this was a huge bit of the fabric of my dad's life. And I mean, it was a real journey.
Yeah.
And really, I mean, it's beautiful. And then, and at the end of it, I was just left with this sense. I was really grateful to all the old band members that, you know, that I'd been able to, you know, be there in the room with them, and learn this complete other side to music. And I mean, and I'd already, I knew I wanted to be in music, but I hadn't really thought about doing, you know, live music on stage particularly. And then that was 3 nights at Union Chapel, and then that was kind of it. And I think it was because without my dad being there, like my dad's band, they weren't able to, like, it wasn't the same dynamic, like, because I didn't have the skill set to direct.
As we discussed earlier, yeah. You're just like, yeah. You're with these luminaries and you're like, shit, well, I'm just going to play the triangle.
Yeah. There's one tune where my job is play the hi-hats, and literally I'd practiced playing the hi-hats for 3 months, but that's not as good as, you know, 10 years. And literally there's a thing, and I'd learned by the time of the gigs that I couldn't play the hi-hats. Like
No way. Really?
well, it's just like timing.
Yeah.
It's, all the instruments are to some extent tuned percussion. Timing is, timing's more important than tuning in that
Yeah.
old adage. But so I mean, I had this. So I mean, obviously, like I'd really love doing it, but I wouldn't like. It didn't feel like I could even presume, or also I didn't want to try and lead a band of musicians who are like 10, 20 years older than me, and much more experienced, better, and I didn't have that relationship with. So it was.
And I guess it's less of a baton passing and more of a reinvention, I guess.
Exactly. I think that's how it happened, because it was like a year later that there were some friends having, they're doing a series of concerts at their house in Italy. And they asked if I wanted to do a musical thing. And so I just asked a bunch of the musicians that I'd been working on various projects with in Ladbroke Grove and Kensal, if they wanted to come out. I think there's 4 of us. And we did, we went out and played a few days of just playing in a fairly, so our friends here in Italy that did it, they make wine. So there's lots of wine, lots of.
That sounds like fucking bliss, bro. Just like, yeah, come to my vineyard and play some music. It's like, yeah.
Kind of. I mean, and I think, at that point I was pretty much hooked, because that was the point where I just really felt this huge pull forwards to do more of this, whatever this is, more of this.
Yeah.
And so then that started like a cascade. So that was with Andy Waterworth playing bass, Darren Berry, who is like my huge kind of musical mentor, and Tom Clark, who a really lovely producer from Ladbroke Grove. And these guys had all been kind of teaching me stuff, and it felt all of a sudden like a team adventure.
Like a band.
Hmm?
Like a band.
Yeah, that's a better word.
Considering it's about music, I mean a group of musicians. A band, yeah. A team adventure. That's proper Enid Blyton. Oh, let's go into the countryside and have a team adventure. With lashings of booze, yeah.
Lashings of booze, exactly. I mean, that was the kind of defining character the first few years, I think, of the project.
Yeah.
But, I mean, well, yeah.
Was it difficult for you? Because, like, I mean, just looking back, say for example, that was your first gig, was essentially a tribute to your dad's work, which is a head fuck in any stretch. And then, there's this other sort of, I guess, grassroots musicianship of rites of passage of playing shit gigs to empty rooms with no promo and stuff. But you've kind of got that advantage because of the background you've got.
That's the thing. I mean, there was Heart of Hearts. There was a huge thing there that everyone who knew my dad's music, because my dad died, tragically young. He was 49.
Fuck. Okay.
And there was a huge desire in me, and also in the fan, people who loved his music, to hear it again in that live context, because it's. In a lot of ways, I mean, the albums, obviously, I love them. They make up a huge proportion of my musical education. But when it's live, my dad's music it's really, it does a thing that I haven't found elsewhere. Because it's sort of playful and hypnotic, and it lacks seriousness, and then that somehow reveals a deeper seriousness. It's kind of, it really tickles me.
That. Well, I think sorry, you were cutting up then. Sorry, please continue.
Sorry. Well, so that precise balance of those elements of kind of inventiveness, playfulness, execution, like it was really nice just to be playing my dad's music in a live context again. And you could feel the audience just loving it. And in a weird kind of slightly English way, I was able to step aside and go, well, they're loving the music. It's not really about me. I'm the front man. I'm not on some ego trip here. So yeah, it was a very, very seductive prospect.
And organic, I guess. It wasn't something you had to force yourself into, I guess.
No, it's completely organic, and it just kind of and pulled in the same direction. So it was, it was kind of, once we'd started, it very quickly just rolled forward. And then, so I got in touch with David Jones at Sirius, who'd been my dad's promoter. And then very quickly, we'd done a few gigs. So I think the festival we did in Italy, mini festival, was in October. And then Christmas, we played some gigs at Black's and a couple of parties, because in a different show. And then in early June we did the ICA, and then we did Glastonbury that year.
That's a hell of a run. Yeah. That's amazing.
And it was literally that thing of in a perverse way, and so we didn't have to do that kind of hard graft of playing to empty rooms and stuff, because the empty rooms came later. So we kind of came in on the coattails, and I mean, so it's ended up being a thing that owes so much to the Penguin Cafe Orchestra, and we play a lot of my dad's tunes, and I'm always versioning new things we haven't done. It's like having a toy chest, full of just amazing stuff you haven't tried out yet. But yeah,
there's definitely a connect as well. So Nigel in the comments is just saying, I first saw Penguin Cafe Orchestra in '88, and then Penguin Cafe in 2010. And that's pretty awesome that you can skip sort of decades and permutations. Also, hello to Cartoon Nero's, Priti, and Vicky. Hi. Thank you all for joining us. But the other thing is that, that the mood that you struck, or the mood you were talking about, that kind of joyful melancholy in a way, which is like, it's so joyful, and then you scratch the surface and there's this kind of yearning that just comes from your heart, and you're like, you bastard, you just kicked me in the nuts and give me a hug at the same time. It's it's like
you get it
totally. And I think that's the thing that you've managed to continue. So I guess you then alluded to the empty rooms after that first re-emergence.
Well, I mean, they weren't empty rooms. That was probably an exaggeration, but I mean, I think we have had to, in the intervening years, we've kind of had to, because we put out our first album as Penguin Cafe Orchestra. So it's a vague disambiguation. It's not, we didn't change our name properly.
What was your first album then? It was. I'm sorry.
A Matter of Life.
A Matter of Life. Why have I not got that?
Well.
What the hell? I've got the Red Book, and I've got.
For the Red Book.
Huh. Yeah. Okay. Oh no, I've got Matter of Life. Of course, I've got it. It's a green cover. Yeah, of course, I've got it. Yeah.
And that's got this amazing collaboration with Catherine Tickell, playing on Landau. And Catherine is this lovely Northumbrian pipes player who did a bunch of stuff with my dad on his last two albums. And it was this really lovely kind of continuation thing. But I mean, at that point, I was it was still, and it was a nascent, just starting out. I mean, it was incredibly, I didn't feel like I was being bored. I was aware that it was quite a kind of bold thing to do.
Yeah. And the potential of and the risk of potentially pissing off a lot of fans.
Well, I mean, I think I was ready for a barrage of
abuse,
basically.
Yeah.
I mean, luckily, I think 2010 internet was probably not as not as potentially mean as
now.
2020. Well, but to a large extent, I mean, no, it never turned up. Like we never
awesome.
We never got slagged off that badly.
But then you've also, I mean, so when did you? So I guess that in that case, you formed a band. You started writing your own songs as well, which must have been another rite of passage. But then you said you were writing behind the scenes all the time anyway, so that was like a thing you were up to anyway. And then, like it's weird because the Red Book to me sounds slightly more darker. It sounds a little darker and a little more stormy.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, I suppose, it's because the first album was kind of this thing of going, well, there is a quality to a lot of my dad's earlier stuff that it's this playful, just having fun with, you know, instruments and toys and stuff that shouldn't be an instrument, but it can be. And also, and like going around the, like, so my dad used to listen to a lot of world music records, you know, in the 70s when you didn't have Spotify and you didn't have YouTube. So yeah, there's a kind of, so he was doing this adventuring vibe by just going to particular few record shops and just listening to stuff from.
And I think that was what people were doing, right? So famously, obviously, the Beatles, and then the whole connection with Brian Eno as well. The being like with your dad's band. It's like there's this whole weird musical connect from the 60s, 70s, and 80s that's just all overlapped with the sort of adventure to find new exotic sounds. I fucking hate that term, and world music as well. But yeah, it's, you know,
most annoying phrase, and I'm not sure why, because it's a nice idea, but it seems it doesn't raise everyone up. It somehow brings everyone down to a common denominator.
Yeah, exactly. It's just like yeah, I don't know. There's something about it. But again, when it's sort of heard and digested and reinterpreted in such an amazing way, it's great. It progresses things forward, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, and also not only that, but literally creating new instruments is the other thing that I'm just fascinated by.
Yes. So, well, yeah, we created an instrument, but it is relatively stupid when compared to Dad and Jeffrey Richardson invented this, which is pretty cool. So the one, okay, I'll start with our stupid one.
Okay.
Which we call the old glass, which is a length of structural glass. You know the stuff that when you look at the edge of it, it's really green, but if you look at it straight, it's clear. So it's like the stuff that you use in architecture, because it's quite thick glass that you can walk on.
Or to make lifts out of and floors and stuff, right?
It's the stuff you use in, exactly. And so we had a friend called Danny Lane, who is an artist who works in glass, and he just gave me a load of offcuts of glass to see if I wanted to just break them and record it, which was very, very sweet. But then we were trying to break them, and it's too hard because this stuff is like structural.
Yeah.
You notice that if you hit it at the right point and you're holding it in the right point, then it has this enormously, it has a super high rigidity. So the resonance is really low, like just insanely low, like super below hearing. But you can feel it with your hand. And then if you put a contact mic on it and run it through a sound system where you've got a stage,
some subs.
Needs the subs.
Yeah.
And what you've got is like a finger tap, like that. You go boom, and then everyone's hats are being blown off.
That's awesome.
Really good fun. I mean, not necessarily that helpful musically, but just really fun. So we used that for a bit.
I don't know, in dance music, like for drum and bass and dubstep and shit, that'd be amazing. Just having one little pane of glass just go dumb, and then just watching the sub just smack people in the face would be amazing.
Seriously, it's like, and it's one of the more satisfying things like, you know, I've ever done, is the thing on a really big stage where we're often like Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon, you know, like we're not the big dance acts, but we're on occasion, when we've been really fortunate, we've been on the stage that later on going to be, you got the Chemical Brothers coming on later, so we have access to those subs.
Wicked. Wait,
and you're like, check it out. Boom.
Okay, what's the instrument called? How big is it? And can I borrow it, please?
Well, I think the best one we had did break. We were on tour in Australia, and it was that thing of, you know, we had like a middle to high quality case, and literally it's really hard to travel with this gear.
Yeah. It's a slab of glass, so.
It's a slab of glass. It is breakable if you bend it beyond none bending. And I mean, we tried a few different lengths, and once you've got the length, then you need to we'd sort of mark out we'd etch on the precise point, and it's basically just that whole thing of harmonic.
Yeah.
So it's half, third, fourth, you know, and you get different levels of stuff, but you basically just want the kicker, which is somewhere in the middle.
That's awesome.
And I mean, the good thing about technology is it's easily repeatable.
Well, because it's a contact mic on a piece of glass. It's not exactly that hard. So, yeah. But what was that? Okay, so what's the instrument your dad made then? Because, and by the way, I want to clarify, what you made was not shit at all. That's a pretty badass instrument, just to say.
Well, thank you. I mean, for that, it's a one-trick pony, but it's a great trick.
It's a very effective one-trick pony. It's like a fucking, it's like a show horse that just flattens the jumps.
With a bass wave, yeah.
Exactly.
So my dad invented a thing called an Aeolian harp.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, again, this was with Jeffrey Richardson. And possibly Giles. But yeah, so basically what it is, it's a huge, long bit of incredibly hard wood. I'm thinking it's oak, but it could be, just any super, like, dark, tough hardwood. And then they put guitar strings on it, but they're like 5 feet, 6 feet long.
Okay. So off the spool and not a packet of strings. You'd have to get it like off the spool to get them that long.
Yeah. I think also, I mean, you can just get in touch with people who make string and go, instead of guitar length, can we just have longer ones? Or maybe you get piano strings. I don't know, but that would work. But yeah, so basically they tuned it to the Aeolian mode, which is you can Google it. I forget the notes.
Okay.
Nice. You've got.
Weirdly, that just came on out of just complete accident.
That's just random.
That's completely random.
Peculiar, because that's a tune by my dad, I think, from his first album.
Yeah.
It's in the Zop section of
the
whole album.
It just played.
Sweet.
Is that the instrument you're talking about?
No, that's.
Oh, okay.
I can actually. That is this Rhodes.
Oh, no way.
Check it out.
That's pretty cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's a good Rhodes.
That is awesome.
At the moment, it's missing an A flat, which is annoying, but.
Huh.
But yeah, so the Aeolian harp was designed to.
A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Isn't that just the simple scale?
Does sound like
a natural minor. Big up, Branwen. How you doing?
But, so the trick with the Aeolian harp is you take it on the top of a nice hill in probably southwest England. Glastonbury tour was the choice, and then you hold it up, and the wind plays the notes.
That's so cool.
And so obviously Aeolus being I'm going to say the Roman god of wind, and it's this idea that it's kind of like John Cage, that whole 60 thing of like unpredictable, like sonic generation, and that you create the music with like indeterminate processes, and so it's like
the like Brownian motion or like sort of random theory applying to musical creation. Yeah, or free writing or whatever, similar sort of thing.
So that stuff, which is interesting, obviously always, but often it sounds terrible. The really kind of like that avant-garde stuff. I mean, starting with I don't know if you know Pierre Schaeffer. Back in, I guess he was like 30.
Actually, the name does actually sound very familiar now you've mentioned it.
It was French. It's called musique concrète, and it was this idea and get sounds from anywhere you like, and then you sculpt the sounds, and then you create things. And then you got Stockhausen coming through after the war, and this whole idea that like the relationship between music, sound, and man is like mutable, and you can kind of and it's negotiable, and it's amazing, really interesting, and like super worthwhile. But I think my dad had this sense, and I also have this sense that it should also sound like you care what it
sounds like.
Like you still worry if you're like as the creator of this thing that you are asking people to listen to, you should kind of have some regard for their experience, and so
100%
that it connects. So the beauty you're experiencing, you need to open the window wide enough for them to come through.
And then once you've got them, you can take them anywhere.
Yeah, as long as it doesn't sound terrible. But
yeah. Well, but that's it. Is that the accessibility aspect of like lots of avant-garde music is really difficult because, especially now, I guess, and I use this all the fucking time when talking to like new artists about how the signal to noise ratio is ridiculously tilted in the favor of noise right now because anyone can make music, anyone can put it out there, but to be really good and cut through requires a strong signal.
Well, this thing, I was listening to something on some awesome station whose name I won't mention, given what I'm next going to say. And there's this thing that someone was pointing out that they can just go out, find any sound source, and then, or even any data source, and go home and turn that into notes. You know, use Mac or something, and they can do that, and it really it's the idea that yes, but just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. You have to take responsibility to do a. You have to help your audience. Like if you've got like a knife that you can just put in a crack and then open it up and see the awesome idea, it's your job to take them with you. And I think that's going like, and I think, you know, the world is going with me on because you've got a lot of artists, certainly in the kind of, you know, the modern classical electronic world, who are really finding a lot of, you know, they're really landing well with audiences because they're taking ideas that are super interesting and they're designing the kind of end result in a way that pulls you in. And so you like it and then you find out the ideas. Whereas some of the more kind of, I don't know, hardcore, slightly kind of grumpy approaches to like, yeah, academic modern music.
I was going to say, it's like one's science and one's art, and that art meeting an audience is different to a scientific experiment meeting its peer group and getting, you know, and, you know, it's a different thing. It's a different beast.
Yeah, I mean, but the science element is not, I mean, it's not science necessarily because you're creating music, theoretically, which is very much not a science.
But it kind of is because it's still just frequencies of air moving, and that's all it is. And it's just about...
you can use the scientific methodology to describe a lot of what happens in music, but you can't... I mean, but science doesn't really... I mean, it's not particularly concerned with why music's good. Like, whereas I think that most people would just go, yeah, music's good. And that, I mean, that element of stuff... I mean, well, okay, so... bits of like what evolutionary neurology, they can concern themselves with why music is good, and
the instinctive, like, you know, heart rate measuring, like tempos at 120 will stimulate certain things, certain frequencies will make you feel happy, certain things will make you feel sad, all those kinds of things.
I didn't know tempos could do that. I know scales have a.
I was thinking like the switch from like a house rave to a drum and bass tempo. There's a definite, if you're playing, and I've experienced this driving from Bombay to Goa, and big up India. But if you want to donate to the British Red Cross, it's all there, going to COVID relief over there. But in a car journey, I noticed that the driver would definitely get more aggro with stuff hitting 175 BPM and much more natural at 120 and then really relaxed at 90. So there's a definite kind of fight or flight response, perhaps, as you get more stimulus coming in.
I mean, did you say 170?
Yeah.
Do you listen to a lot of music at 170?
Yeah, drum and bass is all 170, 160 to 180.
But is that not because most of it is...
It's double timed, so it's half time. But
samples of drum breaks.
Sped up.
And it was doubled a lot of the time because...
Well, I mean, the original Amen break, I forget what tempo it's at, but it was like then slowed down for like hip hop and then sped up and then... like to a fraction. So I reckon if they're running at one, so like the James Brown sort of So I reckon they'd run at about 130, 140, and then pitched up that hit 160, and then when you're DJing, you speed it up even more, so you're closer to 170. And then when you reprocess and add other programming underneath, it hits easily 172, and then you play it out at 178.
Yeah. So, but basically, what you're approaching there is if you 178, you're approaching 90 BPM because no one's going to dance.
But that's the thing is that you move your shoulders to the offbeat.
Yeah.
So you dance the snare,
right.
not the kick. So it's different. It's a whole different, like the what's the word I'm looking for? Fuck, the polyrhythm and your instinct to close it has a natural emotion which is triggered in a different way. I feel. That's what I've.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense. Once if you put the basic BPM, the kind of reported BPM, super high, then you can dance to half that.
Yeah.
But then you are dancing on the downbeat, and not only going on the 2/4 thing. That makes That's
and
really I like that.
So it was like double time beats and then half time bass. And then when dubstep first emerged, I didn't fucking get this. A friend of mine took me to Forward in Shoreditch, and it was like double time bass and half time beats. So to me, it sounded like an intro. It was just like the beat would run at 70, but the bass would run at 140, and the oscillation would be faster. So you're feeling the bass, and you're like, oh, I've got to move twice, basically.
Nice.
And I was like, now I get it, So it was a whole other sort of switch in that paradigm for me.
That's crazy. Yeah. Okay. No, I like that. There's, the thing of, so my dad did a lot of work with the original Penguin Cafe Orchestra, and then I've definitely tried to do it. On crowbar, back to On Topic.
Yes.
This thing in South American music, especially Venezuelan, Brazil, well, all South American music, there's this there's this really fun job to hide the one.
Okay.
This thing. So like the trick is never do anything on one. And then that forces you into a kind of, I'm chasing, I'm engaging a huge part of my brain and just working out, and then all of a sudden you're moving.
Yeah.
And it's really danceable because you're not just like, it's not rote kind of, there's a one, I'm going to do something.
Yeah.
You're thinking and you're engaging your whole kind of creative brain, like reimagining where the pulse is.
Yeah. And I guess without the one, you can shift that pulse to wherever you want to in that bar.
It's mental. I mean, that
awesome.
whole Cuban, the Buena Vista Social Club thing, I think that exposed it to a whole new audience. But I think, so one of my pet, it's like, it's an insecurity I'm fond of. It's like, I know I'm not as good at timing as any of my percussionists or my bass players.
Yeah.
But I want to, I really like, I'm like.
But then you could just let go. If people are better than you in your band, you can kind of defer to them, right? And
that's why they're in your band.
Yeah.
I mean, there's where that's not true, but in our band, that dynamic is real. So, because everyone's better than me.
So you can just hide behind them, basically.
Well, you can you rely on them. It's really, it's nice. I mean, our vibe is a weird one because we don't really claim excellence in any particular fields, but we do really.
But you've got that vibe. That's the thing. You own that sort of joyful but melancholic vibe right in the middle, that sweet spot. And that actually takes me to, like, from the Red Book, which I found to be a little darker. Imperfect Sea is one of my favorite albums ever. It's fucking brilliant.
Thanks, man.
And it features my favorite track, which is Cantorum, as you know.
I was thinking Cantorum today. I'm glad you asked.
Yeah, because you sent me the parts to remix it, and it was around the time. Yeah. And I remixed Anushka's track "Crossing the Rubicon" around the same time. And I was like, I loved her track. I was like, that's wicked. And then when it came to Cantorum, I was like, I fell in love with it so hard. I was like, I really want to have a go at this. And it's too fucking good. I couldn't touch it. So everything I did just sounded shit because the original was too good. And so there's nothing that could be done to it.
Pete Radcliffe, he subsequently went off to become a monk in Thailand. I mean, percussionists are probably some of the most undervalued people in the music scene.
And they don't get publishing revenue. So publishing is generally tied to songwriting, and percussion really isn't songwriting traditionally.
No, exactly. And percussionists, when you've got someone, there's, so like there's in the pocket, and then there's, style, and then someone who's always just beautifully ahead, always beautifully behind. There are these kind of these nuances which I think have so much to do with how you actually absorb a bit of music. Certainly our kind of music. But yeah, I mean, so Cantor and Pete did a stand-up job. It was amazing. Because like I knew enough to try and describe what I was thinking. And then there's a certain point where it goes beyond, specific language, and you're just kind of, you're pointing at ideas without being able to actually say what it is. And then you start. Well, then I started gesticulating, and but yeah, it totally worked in that instance. It was really nice. So yeah, I mean, to anyone who would like to go on and listen to that,
it's a great song.
The percussion is the key to that.
Well, I think there's also an element of me when I was like, you bastard, I wish I'd written this. This is amazing. It's one of the best things. I was like, it's great. And the way the strings move and fit into it. Again, it has that joyful melancholy and that hope buried right within it, which I really enjoy. It's like this contemplative, I can't fucking say it. It makes you think. And it basically... Contemplative, yes. And also there's that sort of literally like clouds breaking and like sunlight shafting through.
It was, I mean, again, it was just like that tune was really fun because it was so the tune that I envisaged had these elements that I wasn't really capable of. I mean, I could say the idea, I couldn't say the exact how it happens, and so this is how we work often. Well, when all systems are, optimal. So Ollie Langford did a lot of the strings on that, and he just kind of went home for 3 days and did the whole thing without sleeping, and then we pulled it back and then put and cello, but it was this thing that it was really nice. For me, the thing that really works on that is the interaction between the strings and the percussion. And certainly when we do it live, it's like my piano bit is do the same thing like 120 times.
Yeah. But it's the sandwich in between them, though, right? That's the thing. The piano is almost playing the bass, like the traditional idea of the percussion talking to the instrumentation with the bass in the middle. Your piano is doing that in this instance.
Well, yeah. So the bass line is played by piano with some quite elaborate synthesis, like super. So you take the piano note and then you run a bunch of synthesis over it to accentuate the lower harmonics. We did a gig, I mean, not to give away anyone's trade secrets, but we did a gig once with Einaudi, Ludwig Einaudi. We opened for him at Blenheim Palace a few years back, and his piano always sounds amazing. And then what I realized when I was there, listening to it, I was like, this is like what we were just doing, but they do it live. Like literally, it's. And I kind of initially I was like, should I feel cheated? And I was like, no, absolutely not. This is taking piano artistry in a good direction because you're
resampling it live almost, or synthesizing from it and then using that as a source.
Well, it's not just EQing it. You're literally taking the signal in real time and then generating new signals off that and then mixing that in. It's and it just makes it sound amazing. And then obviously you have different settings for different tunes.
Well, that was the other thing, is that I think that when I saw you at Royal Festival Hall last, when I was all crippled and on, and it was the launch of Handfuls of Night. It was then, right? Yeah, it was that launch point. And you had a MIDI keyboard on stage. I was like, what the fuck? This is the first time I'd ever seen like a MIDI keyboard in your sets. I was like, okay.
We have avoided them, but yeah, I mean, as I don't I don't necessarily want to just become really slick and do electronics.
Mm.
Well, I mean,
because you want the possibility of fucking up to give you that vibe, right? That's the whole point.
Exactly, and the kind of that's exactly it. So there needs to be like an element in the physical universe that makes it immediate and present. That's like that's an important bit. And so the chopsticks stuck into the keyboard retains the fun, like that. It retains that thing, the possibility of things popping out, and they often do.
And things fucking up, and then other people feeding off it, and
Yeah,
it's that balance, right? That's the fun part. I think if everything's just strict to the grid, there's just no joy.
well, I mean, but it's a different kind of joy, and it's not the one that we're comfortable trying to.
Yeah, I mean, I like when I DJ, I can't deal with a grid. Like the sort of, I think my favorite tempo is something like 177.2, and even then it drifts around that. It slows down and speeds up depending on.
So that's like what 80. Like 80 in terms of the groove.
Yeah, well, it depends on the programming of the track, right? But I found that's the tempo that I really enjoy. But again, there was this really interesting thing that I read, and I forget where it's from, where it talks about sort of the Western musical, the legal infrastructure of Western music is based around songwriting and notes, right? So it's the words, the lyrics, and the notes. And if there had been any sort of representation of color at the start of that industry being formed, groove would have been the thing that you would have zoned in on.
Yeah, I mean, what you mean, kind of
which
like,
I think is quite fascinating to copyright the groove, like percussion and that interplay. So it's a big chunk of music that the lyrics and notes are one thing, but groove is a whole other fucking thing that's copyright free.
I know, but there's the thing about lyrics and notes is that you can write them down.
Yeah, but you can with groove too.
Can you?
Yeah, you could write down the note hits of various things, and you could work out the interplay of them.
Yeah, but I mean, but another thing you can't copyright is instrumentation, and like, and also just the use of like lots of parallel fifths or whatever. And so this whole like, I mean, I think groove is one of those things that. I mean, I take your point that I think that musicians of color have brought just inestimable amounts to the table and haven't been recognized for it. But I don't know how you could. I mean, could James Brown copyright a groove like which is essentially going to end up being a feel in any meaningful sense?
Exactly. And someone in the comments said that's it. It's quite interesting because it was like you can't communicate what the groove is as easily as you could with notes and that. So it's quite fascinating. But it was just this one thing that was positive. It was like, that's a really interesting, almost, I think it was an essay about Afrofuturism. And it was combined in that. It's like, what would a music industry based in Afrofuturism legally look like? Which I thought was fascinating as an approach. I was like, that's interesting.
It is. I mean, it's possible that you could, I mean, you wouldn't be able to achieve it, but you could aspire to worlds where you go, that sounds like 93 to infinity. Like a few those guys, like.
Well, it was the whole aim and break story as well, right? The whole idea of the drummer dying penniless, and it's just like, dude, your break's been sampled the most of any other sample on the planet.
Yeah, I mean,
I forgot his name actually. What's his name? Shit, I should know this.
I've just been sent today. I got sent a limited.
Gregory Coleman. Sorry, Gregory Coleman. Big up Gregory Coleman. Rest in peace, sir. Yes.
I mean, that is a really good example of people trying to make it right, and it's exactly the right impulse. And I mean, the fact that it's recording, I think that should make it a little bit more simple because it's a master right. But I feel, he should have been comfortable in his life because he did a thing that so much creativity jumped off and was so kind of valued and enjoyed by everyone.
I don't think, as you know as well, right? And I hope if I'm mentioning things that you don't want me to, please tell me to shut the fuck up. But also, a lot of musicians from the 60s and 70s are really shit at looking after their copyright. Like really, really shit. Whatever race they are, they're all just shit at looking after their stuff. Generally,
kind of, it's one of the starting points for becoming a musician.
Yeah.
I mean, there are obviously notable exceptions, but yeah,
Yeah.
no one's good at that. I mean, it's really complicated to keep track. If you're a really like in-demand session musician, you need to do a lot of quite kind of accountancy things with, like MCPS. I mean, that's in the UK, and then around the world. So, like, obviously, music doesn't have boundaries anymore. But yeah, registration agencies and administration, publishing companies don't have the same job now that they did when the deal formats were set up. But it's being good at music doesn't. It shouldn't have to mean being good at administration.
All the rest of the shit. Yeah, it's really, really annoying, right?
Fuzzy
It's just...
legal arrangements. It's like, I mean, the ideal in a lot of people's cases is that they want to be free to express themselves musically, and they kind of don't value that aspect of their capabilities, where they're able to, read a spreadsheet. And
Sorry, you just made me laugh. There's a mutual friend of ours who's incredibly well known, who is spreadsheet like they have spreadsheet blindness and can't look at a single spreadsheet. It's just like, fuck. Okay, yeah.
I mean, so you can understand, but I mean, I'm sure that same conflict exists in a billion aspects of life that doesn't involve music. But yeah, I mean, there is a thing. I mean, the whole stuff with Spotify is, it does seem that the setup has been unfairly rigged. It was already a little bit tricky with label deals. I mean, and people that sign away early in their career when they don't know what they're doing, well, that doesn't happen as much. But Van Morrison found a girl to his first manager, and and it's such an important narrative that that kind of shouldn't be possible, because he created a thing.
Yeah.
And got paid.
Well, it's the same as sort of Elvis signing over 50% of all of his revenue to his manager as well. And of course, like every major band in the 60s got fucked over by either the management or the accountant, like all of them, every single one of them.
Yeah, I mean, and it goes back. So the idea of copyright didn't mean anything until 1850, and then it was just people printing
sheet music, right?
Yeah, so Beethoven had this problem, and that's why he managed himself, and he became his own promoter, and he died, not doing very well. Mozart he died penniless, just trying to get paid for stuff, and like this idea that everyone automatically deserves to get paid is like, well, okay, fine, morally yes, but practically it's important to place in context. On the one hand, but then there is, there's a thing of, if you're good at one thing, you don't necessarily end up being good at another thing. I mean, Jay-Z, clearly good at multiple things.
Well, you just hire the right people, I guess. It's interesting sort of talking to you and, like, say, Anushka and looking back at Prince's legacy as well. We talked about this, like, harnessing all the archives of your father's work and putting it as a single resource is kind of important.
By the way, anyone listening should be checking out discography.prince. Whatever.
Yeah, discography.prince.com. Yeah, it's
a really beautiful thing. I kind of feel that everyone should. I noticed they've only got 30-second clips of everything.
Yeah.
But they've
got all the YouTube stuff there as well, so you can go and listen to it. Yeah. But yeah, it's just amazing combining sort of, and I hate using the word legacy. I prefer the word innovation or just art, but combining that body of work is just incredible, and all the notes behind it and stuff. And I think that's it. Did you ever feel a pressure to continue that body of work? Or was it like, we said it was all natural, but is it like there's an album coming up and fuck, I don't want to make this type of music, I want to do something different? And you can't because it's under the name Penguin Cafe.
I know exactly what you mean. And so anytime I want to do something different, I don't use the Penguin Cafe name. I mean, I'll do other stuff. But to be honest, on stage, I just really like doing Penguin Cafe stuff. So, I mean, I'll do a bit of production for people. And I mean, that's the kind of that's an extreme fortunate thing that has come about because of, you know, like my accidents of birth, that I inherited my dad's amazing mics, and I went and trained with Ian Murray.
And the road, actually. Let's not forget the road.
Roads. I mean, no, I mean, there's a bunch of like stuff I use all the time that was my dad, and so it's kind of that. I mean, I really have inherited his sense of what's a good idea. I mean, and so obviously I'll do different stuff, and that will end up being, it'll have a different home. But yeah.
I think also that came full circle in the last album, because you did a fucking Kraftwerk cover.
Yeah.
And a Simian Mobile Disco cover, which I was like, okay, that's a cool way of bringing it up to date. Like, there you go.
Well, I do. It's a great track, and it was really good fun, because it was like that totally came about because they were messing about with oscillators. So the idea of, I just really liked the idea of doing that, kind of going into sync and out of sync. Do you remember? Is it Orbital, the Morpheus loop, where the Morpheus space where time becomes a loop?
I'm looking it up because I don't know what you're referring to.
It's Orbital.
No, I can't find it, bruv. Sorry, man.
It could be someone else, but but I like the idea of taking quite a kind of electro. It's an idea of like malappropriation of electronic gear or electrical gear, and then just back into violins and pianos and stuff which involve wood.
But also, you're talking about sort of reaching your audience, and it was really interesting sitting in Royal Festival Hall when you did that, and you said it was an SMD cover, like this is a cover of Simian Mobile Disco, and the kind of chin-strokey audience members that are very, you know, not nerdy as such, but you know, were how do I describe this without sounding rude? But you know what I mean. We're just like, oh, Simian Mobile Disco, oh yes. It was just like, that's fucking hilarious. I was like, this is wicked. Like taking the rave to a different audience was quite hilarious to see for me.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that, but that is the thing that, I mean, so with my dad's audience, there is just this thing that it was totally kind of everyone, and so there are lots of people who came to it from an academic. I really like Robert Fripp, and I've dipped into PCO, and then there are lots of people who came to it because I really liked, you know, the Hewlett Packard advert. And
don't forget the 1-to-1 commercial, or Mercury, wasn't it Mercury? It was like
Mercury 1-to-1, same thing back in the day.
Okay, well, yeah. Well, they morphed, didn't they? Yeah.
And they had that. Yeah, I mean, so there's a lot of stuff that is kind of on the nose, but because I don't know, I mean, there's a kind of joy to it. Certainly from my dad's side. I mean, I've currently got a thing about how we did actually achieve a degree of utopia in mid to late 90s. But there was a lot going on musically and artistically that was quite good. I mean, yeah, not perfect, obviously, but it'll take some doing to get back up there again. And I think the whole thing of the 1-to-1 advert, I mean, because it was obviously commercial and mercantile and trying to turn music into money, but at the same time it was like there were lots of celebrities doing stuff that was essentially stupid, but everyone liked it.
Yeah. It was forgivable, basically. It was relatable and forgivable at the same time.
It's like there's no downside other than well, you know.
It is what it is. That's interesting. You mentioned the utopia bit of the sort of, because I remember vividly 97. I think it was around the election. Obviously, it was the whole sort of transformation point. And it was interesting because I felt that again in 2007, just before the crash. I was like, oh, there's something happening here that feels like we've turned a corner, and then the whole fucking world just blew up and changed. It was like there was 2 points in my life where I feel those like, oh yeah, we've reached a point, and then it didn't.
Interesting, yeah. I mean, well, so I mean, but presumably it wasn't quite so optimistic, the 2007.
Well, I don't know. For me personally, it was. I was just like, okay, there's like, you know, just things that you care about, like sort of, you know, obvious things like the planet and health and rampant consumerism and whatever, and then suddenly you've got this overarching financial crash that brings all that progression to a grinding halt, and then
well, I think it hurt a lot of people
flips you back.
that didn't realize they were part of a bubble.
And maybe that's it. Maybe it was a bubble and naivety, perhaps. And maybe now I'm a cynical bastard. You know, and that's what it is. I'm just a complete fucking cynic. Because there was two of them, like you said, it was like that experience of hopefulness in around about 97 and then again in 2007 that were met with like the harsh reality of like, you know, crashes, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, this idea that post-COVID, we could be... So if
the roaring 20s.
Yeah, the COVID cycle of 100 years and the crash cycle of 10 years. Yeah. So,
well, it was interesting. I was talking to a friend of mine in India who I do a lot of stuff with, and we're obviously looking at the horrors coming out of India and how we can help using whatever mechanisms we can. Because, I mean, you know, crisis management and event management, there's a lot of overlap, you know.
Especially depending on the event.
Well, yeah, especially in India, because it's always a shit show. Like, there's no social safety nets. There's always, you know, it's all got to be done from the hip. You know what I mean? And you got to deal with the various palms you have to grease to make things happen. So just like how to help and stuff. So I don't know. I think that there's, yeah, I think there's I hope you're correct. Let's leave it at that. I hope you're right. I hope that there is some sort of rebound from this, but
I don't know.
My faith in humanity is eroding every day, basically.
Yeah, I mean, are we working to like basically an hour for this interview?
Oh, however long you want, bruv. We can call it whenever you want to.
I mean, I do feel that the shape of the thing that's happening in India is like, it was going to happen to someone. It was going to happen somewhere. This thing of proper collapse of the whole system. And so what's going to happen is like, you're going to see the worst of humanity, and it's going to play out, and it's going to be a thing of like a lack of structure. And then inevitably, in some form, there will be some sort of, like
rebound, some bounce back to it.
And it'll go back in the other direction. But the thing is, like, it's not a story of the triumph of people being great. It's a story of the inevitability of just things
balancing out naturally.
And
well,
then,
I mean,
fighting
yeah,
back.
to your point, I think people being great is part of it, to be fair. Now I'm going to contradict myself about my whole lack of faith in humanity. Because it was the same. I realized that looking at my friends in India now, it was the same panic I had over here in England when shit was hitting the fan here. And it's that same panic of like, there's so many deaths and whatever, but we have social safety nets here. We have a police force here. We have, an open system. Well, relatively open and still corrupt as fuck. But, we have some recourse, an open media, the ability to say whatever the fuck we want to, all those kinds of things. But actually the sort of human beings pulling together to be good to each other is actually amazing to see in India too. I guess what I'm getting at is that, if there's a certain group of people that I know that are still in denial about certain aspects of things, it's just yeah. I just think that if you happen to be marching in the streets and you look to your right and your left and you happen to be with a Nazi, you might have taken a wrong turn somewhere.
Well, yeah, like in the time.
And I'm saying that generally across the world. I'm just saying, and I'll leave it at that. That's open to interpretation. But,
God, that's euphemistic and intriguing. Did you go marching with a Nazi?
Well, this is the point. If you, I mean, like, of course, governments are nefarious and they will use things to erode civil liberties, and that has to be kept an eye on. But
there's the old principle that governments are set up by people to make their life function, like, so they can function and they are practicable. Like, so this idea that governments are set up by us for us.
Isn't necessarily true.
Well, originally they were completely for us, by us, and then gradually, after a few generations, the governments have all the power, so they will then start thinking that laws are for us, like for them, by them, and then the job they do easier, and then by one level of separation, they're saying it's for us, but we're the problem that governments have, and originally. The problem was that we didn't. So it's easy to forget that they work for us. We pay them.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I think that's it. And I think that they should be challenged at every step of the way. I think that that's exactly what should happen. But yeah, I mean, I hope you're correct. I hope there is going to be a rebound into positivity and this Roaring Twenties thing will happen. That'd be fucking great. I mean, I'm looking forward to a live gig for sure. Speaking of which, when are you playing next? Because I'm really fucking confused.
I say, look, this shit is getting real with the UK. Like, we've got a big Barbican Day in March next year, 22, and then we've just had a festival confirmed in September this year.
Okay. Isn't there a May gig coming up soon as well?
Not
or am I misreading it? That's what I was wondering.
I don't think we've got one in May. Well, unless it's in Italy, it'll be tricky.
Okay.
But
all right.
Yeah, getting like this all of a sudden, because this rollout and the kind of reducing of restrictions is going ahead, and it seems to be not resulting in everyone's, becoming ill. Yeah. So now all of a sudden we're talking about shows in July in London. It's literally things are coming back online, and the huge enthusiasm from not just the artists, but also the kind of the structural, like the people who are normally like potential like EOs, right? Everyone's just going, this looks like the time. It's like, you're kind of, your most dour accountant is going, it looks like time to get back on. Time to get the roller skates back on.
So what's the next gig then? The next gig in the UK?
Well, I think, I 100% definitely shouldn't say, because it's totally subject to everyone.
Okay, fine.
But yeah, July. July.
Okay.
That's the thing. I mean,
awesome.
Discussing it. So, but that's good. I mean, we all thought 2020 was a write-off and then 21 would be fine, but clearly that's not how this works. But having said that, like summer onwards, barring huge f-ups, it does appear that that's where we're heading.
Man. Well, look, I'm totally going to bug you for guest list for that gig, or I just buy a ticket. Fuck it. I want to go and see some. Like, I am desperate to hear some live music.
Get up on stage.
Oh, mate.
Do some scratching.
Mate, I'm going to basically be that. You know that when you were a kid and you didn't want to get up on stage with your dad because you had no talent? That's me now. You are my father. Yes. That's what it is. Look, bro, thank you so much for this chat. Really appreciate it. It's been lovely catching up, and thank you for the cocktails. Big up Disco Cocktails. And big up the Ladies and Gentlemen's Bar in where? Where is it in London?
At the bottom of Furnace Road. It's by the station, Kentish Town Station. I live
Kentish Town,
right next door to the bar, and I can I can confirm it's amazing.
Hence these hookups, which has just been great. But and this is perfect timing because I've run out of cocktails and I can go pee. This is awesome. Wow. And also thank you to everyone that's donated to the British Red Cross for COVID relief all over the world, especially India right now. Thank you for that. And it's been really sweet catching up, bro. Look forward to doing it in real life.
Really good. Let's do it.
Yeah, man. Well, big love. Take care.
Ciao, ciao.
Bye. Thank you for joining us, everyone, as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Bye.